Welcome to Relation Tales. Please like this video and subscribe Relation Tales. I've been married to my wife for 6 years, and everything in our daily lives is going well. We have a 2-year-old daughter. My wife is a lovely woman with soft skin, a small, well-kept chest, long legs, and a nice figure. I loved her very much. But now, let me get to the main point. My wife worked for a company that wasn't doing well. Why do I say that? Let me explain. The company wasn't good because the relationships between employees were unprofessional and irresponsible. How do I know this? I'll tell you. I didn't want my wife to go to the company event. I had a bad feeling that something would go wrong. She started getting ready for the event 2 weeks ago, shopping for a dress, shoes, and even perfume. She picked the perfume herself. I didn't like the smell, but my wife said I wouldn't have to smell it because she would wash it off when she got home. The dress she chose had a very low neckline. I didn't like it, but my wife jokingly said she loved me but wanted to impress her female colleagues, who had a bet on who would look better. They bet a case of expensive champagne. The New Year celebration in the team started at 4 in the afternoon and lasted until 11. That's how it's done now. Besides, I had no reason not to trust my wife. She had never let me down. On December 30th, I saw her off and a taxi came for her. I asked her to stay, albeit with hope. But she replied that she couldn't because it would affect her professional reputation. Her boss didn't like refusals, and it could negatively impact her career. Of course, she earned good money, unlike me, who worked as a teacher, although I had a decent and stable salary, wasn't as high as hers. When my wife left, I decided to let her relax and have fun. After all, she had attended events organized by her company before. I always let her go, but this time I felt a strange emptiness, worry, and a sense of something unpleasant that threw me off balance. I gave my wife a call at about 10 o'clock at night. She answered the phone, but I had to yell above the noises of celebration and loud music to be heard. I wanted to know when she intended to return home. In response, she said that they had made the decision to carry on the festivities and that she would return in 2 hours. Amidst all the noise, I heard someone persistently calling my wife to dance. The appointed time passed and my wife still hadn't come home. When I tried to call her, her phone was turned off. She only returned in the evening of the next day, 4 hours before New Year's Eve, and she seemed slightly tipsy. She passionately kissed me on the lips. Throughout the time she was gone, a sense of foreboding never left me. I couldn't sleep waiting for her. And every 15 minutes I called her, her friends, acquaintances, and relatives. I only had one colleague's number, her friend from work. But even that turned out to be unreachable. I decided that if she didn't come back by New Year's, I would go to the police, just in case I took our child to my mother's. When she came in, I asked her right away why her phone was turned off. My wife looked surprised and pretended not to know why it was off or why I hadn't called her. She said maybe the phone turned off by itself. After she quickly took a shower, she hurried to the kitchen to help me finish cooking. But I had already done almost everything, only the salads needed mixing and decorating. While she was busy in the kitchen, I kept trying to find out where she had been, especially since she had only been gone a few hours. But she kept saying we'd talk about it later. I welcomed the new year with tension, even though my wife tried to cheer me up by talking about love, our child, and the future. She even started sitting on my lap and kissing me. But I could see that she was doing it forcibly, unnaturally. She had never behaved like this before. I realized that my wife was hiding something. After she had 3 glasses of champagne, she became slightly intoxicated. I myself hardly drank, just took a sip from the flute when midnight struck, and that was it. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, my wife said she was very tired and going to bed. I didn't wake her up early in the morning. I knew where they were celebrating the holiday, so I decided to go there. During the drive, I deliberately turned off my phone. An hour later, I arrived at the venue. Fortunately, it was the 1st of January, and there were few cars on the road. I found the head of security, who turned out to be a beautiful woman in her 50s. She informed me that, yes, such a corporation was celebrating New Year's during our conversation. They did not, however, return home because they had prepaid for both the restaurant and the hotel rooms they had hired. The only thing they wouldn't show me was the camera footage, claiming it contained sensitive information. But as the saying goes, the castle gates will always open for gold-laden donkeys. I found the security guard who, for a certain sum, showed me and copied everything I needed onto a flash drive. I assured him that these video materials would not leave my hands. Yes, I saw my wife. She wasn't heavily intoxicated. I saw her walking towards a room with a man who gently held her waist. I saw them stand in front of the room, passionately kissing. I saw them enter the room. An hour and a half later, I saw the first man leave the room, and then he returned with another man. Sometimes I partially saw what was happening inside the room, because the camera was located in the corridor, and only captured a portion of the room with the bed. Although I observed only fragments, when the door was opened, it was enough. I saw my wife with one man at first, then I saw him leave and another man arrived, and then I saw my wife with both of them at the same time. In between their sexual encounters, they drank champagne, talked, and then resumed their activities. This went on all night. The men left my wife's hotel room around 11 a.m. the next day. One man left first, and the other stayed behind, leaving an hour later. An hour after that, my wife came out of the room. The last photos showed my wife and her colleague getting into a taxi. I drove home, filled with anger and frustration. I almost got into a couple of accidents, but kept driving. I got home late that night. Watching the video and downloading the necessary episodes took up the entire day and evening. My wife greeted me first with anger, but then, as she looked at me, her anger turned into concern and hurt. With a hurt tone in her voice, she asked where I had disappeared to and why my phone was unreachable. I said that no one had called me, took out my phone, and turned it on in front of her, saying that I hadn't turned it off. It must have shut off by itself. With feigned bewilderment, I said that I had also wondered why no one had called me. At that moment, I saw confusion and tension on my wife's face for the first time. I realized that she was contemplating something. So I asked her if she wanted to tell me where she had been all night, to be honest with me. My wife said that she had been at a corporate party, had too much to drink. They left in the evening right after the party ended. She fell asleep in the taxi, and her friend brought her to her own home. She spent the night at her friend's place, and during the day she felt very sick, experiencing severe nausea, and couldn't leave her colleague's house. I asked my wife if she was telling me the truth. With fear in her voice, she said it was the absolute truth, and that she had no reason to lie to me. That's when I suggested going to visit this to thank her and also to wish her a happy new year. My wife said she wasn't ready, that she was feeling unwell, and that she needed to put on makeup before going to her colleague's place. Besides, her colleague mentioned that she planned to visit her parents on the 1st of January and stay there until the end of the holiday weekend. So I told my wife directly if she would like to watch a new erotic film with me where she played the lead role. It was at that moment that my wife was genuinely frightened. She said she didn't want to watch anything. I went, grabbed the laptop, and transferred all the video recordings from the flash drive. When I entered the bedroom again, my wife was quietly crying. I started playing the recording and placed the laptop in front of her on the bed. My wife burst into tears and began speaking incoherently, saying that she didn't want this, that she had been violated. That's when I suggested going to the police. Of course she refused, and began saying that she had too much to drink, that she didn't know how it happened. She told me that she loved me and our little one, begging me not to jump to hasty conclusions, for she said that we had a child, and he shouldn't grow up without a father. She told me I was a good husband and that I fulfilled her in every way. She said that was why she had loved me and still loved me. Hearing this hurt. It was painful to look at her and listen to her confused excuses and promises of sincere, unchanging love for our family and our child. I was filled with rage and started yelling. What was she thinking when she brought another man into her hotel room, and when there were two men involved? Did she think about our family, our child, or me at all? Were all her work events like this? My crying wife started begging for forgiveness, asking to start over. She claimed it was a one-time mistake, and that she would never repeat it again in her life. She didn't want to lose me. She wanted both parents to raise our child. She insisted that our child needed a mother and a father. The child shouldn't grow up without a father, and should live in a complete family. She said she was willing to die for what she had done. She couldn't imagine her life without me and our child. That's when I erupted once again. I screamed and asked the question, what, and most importantly, who was she thinking about in that hotel room? What and who was she thinking about when she went to that corporate event? Knowing in advance that she wouldn't come back on time, knowing that everything was already paid for. Why did she lie to me from the very beginning? Who is that man she entered the room with? And who is the second one who joined them later? My wife stopped crying and sat there with a detached expression on her face. She said she understood everything, that she didn't want this, but it happened, and she was willing to do anything to save our family. She said that our child, and I meant everything to her. She couldn't imagine her future without me and our little one. Silently, I took out a suitcase and started packing my things. My wife sat there, as if frozen, staring at one spot and remaining silent. Hysterics ensued when I reached the door. She begged me not to leave, asked me to stay, begged for forgiveness, and tried to kiss me. She clung so tightly to my jacket that I could barely detach her from me, nearly tearing the jacket in the process. I walked away. I called my mother and asked her to keep the child with her until the end of the holiday. I asked her not to answer any calls from my wife, and most importantly, not to give her the child under any circumstances. I said I would explain everything later, that I needed to be alone. In fact, it would be better for my mother to leave with the little one and go to relatives. I booked a hotel room, ordered food and alcohol, and lay in bed with the TV on. I drank, snacked, and thought about moments from my life until I fell into a drunken sleep. I was woken up during the day by a phone call from my father-in-law asking when my wife, daughter, and I would visit them. I told him we wouldn't be able to come, that's all. When I got home, I told my wife I was filing for divorce. I had thought it through and realized I could never forgive her. I told her she was unfaithful and she should leave my apartment since I bought it before we got married. I also said I would take legal action to get custody of our daughter because of her immoral behavior. Then I turned around, walked out, got in my car, and drove away. No one tried to stop me. I found her 2 colleagues and gathered information about them. It turned out both were married with children. As payback, I sent their wives a video of my ex-wife with their husbands. I didn't care what happened to them afterward. I knew I needed to start fresh. Second story, 3 months ago, I found out that my wife was cheating on me with an ex-boyfriend from 10 years ago. They broke up back then because of his drug problems. I've heard that she might have used drugs too, though not as an addiction. I can't rule out the possibility that she's involved with drugs now. We were together for 5 years, have 2 kids, and own a house. Our relationship was very stable. We rarely argued, and we were a good team when it came to the kids. But since our second child was born, our relationship became a bit boring and predictable. He won her over with romantic gestures, cards, jewelry, love notes, and taking time off work to meet her things we hadn't done in a long time. After I confronted her, she stayed with me for 2 weeks, but I found out she was still secretly contacting him. She said she needed time to end the affair, but I couldn't accept that. We argued, and she moved in with him. She says she loves us both, but feels he gives her something that's missing in our relationship. She admitted that what she did was wrong and said she would never have left me if I hadn't found out. She felt she had no other choice but to move in with him since she had no family to stay with. Since then, we've seen each other several times, and our meetings often end in long hugs and kisses. When we say goodbye, she starts crying and hugs me for minutes. But whenever I suggest she comes back, she becomes distant and ignores me for days. Everyone tells me to move on, but I can't ignore that I still love her very much. I feel, or maybe just hope, that she still loves me too, but something is stopping her from coming back. This might sound silly, but has anyone been in a similar situation and can offer advice?